What if the key to a decades-old murder mystery was quietly resting between the pages of a forgotten library book? What if justice had been gathering dust, literally, for years? This isn't a metaphor. It's the story of how a seemingly ordinary piece of literature led investigators straight to a killer who had slipped through the cracks of justice for more than 3 decades. Welcome to one of the most astonishing cold case breakthroughs ever solved by DNA, hidden not at a crime scene, but in a quiet corner of a public library. This is the story of Catherine Monroe, a 23-year-old college student found strangled in her apartment in 1987. Her killer vanished without a trace, until a library book, checked out and forgotten, came back to life. Stay with us as we turn each chilling page of this story, right here on True Crime Hub. It was a bitter cold morning in March 1987 when Catherine Monroe was found dead in her off-campus apartment in Madison, Wisconsin. She was a psychology student, bright, curious, and kind. Her dreams of working with troubled youth were cut short by an act of violence that sent shockwaves through the college community. There was no sign of forced entry. Her body was found on the floor beside her desk. Her apartment was otherwise untouched. Whoever did this knew how to leave no trace, or so it seemed. Despite an exhaustive investigation, the case quickly went cold. Fingerprints yielded nothing. No viable suspects. No motive. But Catherine's family never stopped hoping. They kept her memory alive through annual memorials and by supporting forensic initiatives. Her mother, Diane, wrote to the police department every year on the anniversary of Catherine's death, begging them not to forget. Her father, James, created a small scholarship in her name at the university, small acts to keep her light from being extinguished completely. The community, too, remembered. Every March 7th, students and professors would gather for a candlelight vigil in front of Monroe Hall, a dormitory named after the late Catherine. But still, no answers. The police had interviewed dozens of Catherine's classmates, professors, and acquaintances. Nothing stuck. Not a single viable lead. But then, fate intervened. In 2022, a dusty donation arrived at the Madison Central Library. 5 boxes of old books from the estate of an elderly man who had recently passed away in Arizona. The boxes were part of a larger donation drive to expand the regional history section of the library. The books seemed ordinary at first: textbooks, novels, historical accounts. One book in particular stood out: Criminal Minds, The Psychology of Evil. It wasn't just the title that caught the librarian's eye. Inside, stuck between pages 112 and 113, was a yellowed library checkout card. The ink had faded, and the corners of the card curled with age. But it clearly bore a stamp, checked out March 1987. But there was something else. The card looked stained. The edge of one corner seemed oddly discolored, brownish, like old blood or skin oil. The librarian, Susan Weller, debated tossing it. But something in her gut told her not to. Susan, an amateur true crime enthusiast herself, had read about cases where DNA had been pulled from ancient letters and envelopes. Just for fun, she mentioned the find to a friend, Detective Carla Brunner, at a dinner party that weekend. Brunner was intrigued. She requested the book, secured it into evidence, and forwarded it to the state crime lab for testing. They weren't optimistic. After all, it had been more than 35 years. But hope, in cold cases, is a stubborn thing. To everyone's surprise, the DNA lab was able to recover a usable epithelial cell sample from the card. It was enough to build a partial DNA profile. They ran it through CODIS, the National DNA Database. Nothing. But then, a forensic genealogist suggested trying a public site, GED Match. The partial profile was uploaded, and it found a match, not direct, but familial. A second cousin, living in Oregon. This sparked the beginning of an intricate and exhaustive process called genealogical triangulation. Over the course of several weeks, the team constructed a family tree based on census records, public marriage and death certificates, obituaries, and social media sleuthing. The web narrowed, and a name kept surfacing: Thomas Gerald Clayton. Thomas had been a student at the same university in the 80s. He had lived in the dorm 2 floors above Catherine. There was no direct connection in the university files. No known relationship. But as they dug further, the picture began to shift. He had been academically gifted, though quiet. He was studying psychology, just like Catherine. He had even taken one of the same courses, psychopathology and deviant behavior, in the spring of 1987. He'd left the university shortly after Catherine's death and moved to Arizona. Changed his name slightly, using T. Gerald professionally. He'd built a new life, a wife, 2 children, a booming real estate career. A completely unremarkable man in every way, until the past came calling. Police approached Thomas at an open house in Phoenix. They posed as prospective buyers, then revealed their badges. He was caught off guard, but calm. That changed when they showed him the book. "Do you recognize this?" one detective asked, placing Criminal Minds on the kitchen island. Thomas stared at it, his hand hovering, then retracting. His eyes darted to the door. "Do you remember Catherine Monroe?" His breathing changed. In a controlled interview room at Phoenix PD, Thomas broke. He admitted to everything. Catherine had discovered he plagiarized her midterm paper. She threatened to report him. Afraid of expulsion, he followed her home. He claimed he only wanted to scare her into silence. But it got physical. She fought back. He panicked. He strangled her. He wiped the place down, took nothing, and left. And he never told a soul. For 35 years. Extradited to Wisconsin, Thomas faced trial in the fall of 2023. The DNA, the confession, and the timeline were airtight. His defense team attempted to argue diminished responsibility, citing a psychiatric breakdown in 1987. The court wasn't swayed. In her victim impact statement, Catherine's mother said, "You took her future, her voice, but you didn't bury her truth. It lived, in ink, in paper, in the book she once held." Thomas Clayton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This case rewrote forensic history. DNA from paper, decades later, something previously thought impossible. The Monroe case prompted renewed efforts to scan physical evidence from decades-old materials across the country. It sparked the formation of a national initiative, Books That Talk, a non-profit effort to re-examine library materials and old correspondence for forensic leads. Dozens of libraries now cooperate with local law enforcement in cold case reviews. The case was even featured at a major forensic science conference in 2024 as a keynote example of forensic serendipity. Today, Catherine's memory lives on, not just through her family, but in the community she inspired. The Catherine Monroe Foundation supports DNA testing for unsolved crimes and funds scholarships for students in forensic psychology. At the Madison Central Library, a memorial reading room is dedicated to her. And the book, Criminal Minds, The Psychology of Evil, sits behind glass, a silent witness to justice delayed, but not denied. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to True Crime Hub. We bring light to forgotten stories, giving victims the voices they were denied. Like this video, share it with others, and leave a comment. Should libraries scan old books for DNA? Could your next borrowed book hold a clue? Justice, like truth, has no expiration date. Sometimes, it lives in the margins. Subscribe. Like. Stay curious. Stay vigilant.